everyone, and happy Halloween. My name is Palma Accardi, and you are watching Tidal Flooding Talk.
I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon. Yeah, happy Halloween. Welcome back. Got to take my little 2-year-old Kenzie out for her first trick-or-treating last night in PA and tonight in South Jersey. And,
oh my goodness.
And this is a treat, too, because for the first time in a year, we are back. And there's no better person to be back with than Jim Eberwine.
Oh.
Meteorologist Jim Eberwine is our guest on this Welcome Back edition, Jim.
Boo.
It says
Welcome
bring
back,
them
Welcome back. And thank you very much for inviting me on this eerie night.
Did you do trick-or-treating yet?
Not yet. I'll
Not yet?
10:30, 11 I do it.
I bet you there's some aspiring meteorologists that are dressed up like Jim Eberwine.
Yeah.
Tonight. I thought I saw a
It's
couple
not
of
really,
little
it's
Jim
not really me.
Eberwine.
It's not really me. It's
Why don't you
something
ask everybody if everything looks good?
All right, and this is our first time back in a year, so you can see us. If you can hear us, just give us a thumbs up online. And this is also the start of a semi-regular return. I think in early 22, Palma, we're going to be back. I'm sure Jim Eberwine's going to be a regular guest, and he's one of our more popular and requested guests, but you're used to that. But we are in early January going to be back every Sunday evening. With the holidays coming up, and a lot's happened, Palma. I know my wife is 7 months pregnant, so we are expecting a baby around Christmas. So it's going to be tough to guarantee Sunday evenings. But we are going to be back here occasionally through the end of the year, and then regularly in December.
Yes, we will. And how many times have you been on the show, Jim?
I think 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I would have guessed more than that.
Yeah, I got a whole wardrobe of
Oh yeah, just count the Irish pub.
Yeah, I got 2 hats.
yes. That's right, and that's where we are. We're at the Irish pub. Now we are upstairs in the beautiful hotel lobby. Now in the meantime, Kathy Burke and Company doing an awesome job. Going to start decorating for the holidays. I know we've had you on during Christmas.
Oh, this is so beautiful. I feel like I'm on the Titanic.
Yeah, it is.
Definitely worth a trip visiting the Irish pub
Absolutely.
in the month of December or whenever they start decorating because it's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
I wonder how long it takes because I mean they go all out
I think the
downstairs.
elves
She starts
come in the
November
middle of the
15th.
night.
She starts November
It
15th.
starts November 15th. I mean, yeah, they go all out, and it's so tasteful. It's not
Oh,
Clark Griswoldish. It's just tastefully done. But hey, it's Halloween tonight. I'm the only one who wore the orange, but you guys are much better dressed than I am.
That's
So
spooky looking.
yeah, and Jim is too.
Well, I've got my Halloween story from 1938.
That's right. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the official, I put it somewhere. The official,
Right there.
This is the official logbook from the New Jersey State Police on the night of October 30th, 1938, on War of the Worlds. And they talk about Martians invading Grover's, what was that, Grover's
Mills.
Grover's Mills up in near Triton. And the logbook says, oh my God, people are calling in, they're panicking. Martians have landed.
Tom Quirk's name
Tom
is on
Quirk is on there. Yeah.
Orson Welles, I think.
That was Orson Welles. So that's the official.
Browns Mills. Browns Mills.
This is the official logbook page from the state police.
And Jim's always fun. Usually I learn something weather-wise from Jim, but tonight I learned something otherwise. Jim's always full of interesting information. And this welcome back edition, this is kind of going to be informal. We'll talk a little weather. We've had kind of a busy start to the tidal flooding season.
Yep.
It's the anniversary of Sandy. 9 years now. So, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to fire away. Also, some exciting news with the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. We're going to do a show on eventually as well. Establishment here in South Jersey, in Atlantic City, of a resiliency center, and a lot of excitement there. We're going to bring on the new director of that. So a lot going on. A lot can happen in a year. I'm sure a lot's happened in a year with Jim and Palma and with all of you. So it's nice to have you back on this Halloween.
Now, since you said Sandy, it's been 9 years. Jim, do you think that after 9 years it's still fresh in everyone's minds, or do you think people have sort of, not forgotten, but they're not as prepared as maybe a few years after Sandy?
Well, that's a good point because, again, we never had file footage on any storms in the past. Whereas the Gulf of Mexico and down in the Carolinas, they had file footage, and they go through these storms every couple of years. You have a couple of fours in the Gulf of Mexico, and here comes Sandy, hitting the most densely populated state in the country. And what where we prepared for it. We knew it was coming, but when it did come, there was a sense of denial of all the damage that it did. And after 9 years, there's still people that are still cleaning up.
But wasn't Irene part of that too? Because we had Irene just the year
Irene was
before.
the year before.
Yeah, and that was supposed to be a big deal, and
Irene was our first mandatory evacuation.
yeah.
But then since nothing happened, Sandy came along.
I always felt that hurt us.
I'm not going because nothing happened in Irene.
I think that was a big deal.
That was just kind of a wild, like 7-year stretch.
Yeah.
And that was the heart of my NBC 40 days. You know, I think it kicked up with the storm. I give you credit. You deemed Norita. Ida made a lot of headlines this year, of course, but that was the Veterans Day nor'easter back in 2009.
Right.
We had 3 blizzards in 2 years, including some significant tidal flooding from those. We had an earthquake, even though it's not weather. We'll throw that in. That's right. We had Irene, we had Sandy, we had Jonas. So that 7-year stretch, it was just so incredible. Yeah. And things have settled down a little bit since then.
Yeah, they have. And to your point, Pamela, people do forget. People really do forget, because when you have a 24-hour news cycle, the news is just coming so fast at you, and then here's a big story, and then there's another big story somewhere, so this one gets pushed aside. So I always tell people, I've told you this before, if you're going to have a disaster, you want to be selfish. You don't want to share it with nobody. If I'm going to blast it in my town of Absecon, I don't want to share it with New York, because when you do, everybody forgets Absecon and focuses on New York. So that's what happened with Sandy. Our derecho in 2012, which came same year as Sandy, everybody was focused on Atlantic County, trying to get us back on our feet, trying to get our power back. And other 20 counties came to our aid. But when we had Sandy, nobody was looking at us. They were looking at New York and Philly. And
you always look at the hardest hit areas.
Yeah, you look at the hardest hit areas.
A good example of that, and again, this isn't tidal flooding, but this was the Molokai Hill tornado this year.
Yes.
You know, that was an incredibly powerful tornado, very, very localized.
Right.
So all the attention, rightfully goes there to help homeowners.
Right. Yeah. And you had everybody pouring in from Delaware, Pennsylvania, everybody was pouring in. Yeah, and that's the nature of the business that we are in. And you're talking about the coalition with Tom and this new resiliency team that you have. Atlantic City, if you look at the reports coming out of NOAA, NOS, and New York Times, Atlantic City's ground zero for the flooding. They're always talking about Atlantic City. So now, what you've done is you've gone one step farther. You're bringing all the attention to Atlantic City, plus the knowledge to Atlantic City, plus the physical setup to Atlantic City to study the business of coastal flooding. So it's here. So there should be no argument now as to what you're going to do. You know what you're going to do. You're going to try to educate people about this.
It's all about education, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's all it is. Education. It's not fear. It's not fear. It's education.
Right, and just like putting an earthquake center in California,
Yes.
or a hurricane center in Florida, you put the tidal flooding center. You're right. I think in New Jersey, and I think there is no
Where's
better spot
the
in Atlantic
hurricane
City.
center in Miami?
That's right.
Where's the severe storm center? Oklahoma. Where's where's the National Earthquake Information Center? Up in West.
No, wait a second. The Hurricane Center's in Colorado, right?
Yeah, Dr. Gray. That poor fellow, he passed away a few years ago. And everybody used to mock him because what does this guy in the Rockies know about hurricanes? But little did they know that he was good friends with all the hurricane forecasters.
I will make an observation too. In this new season of Tidal Flooding Talk, I think the Peanut Gallery, aka Tom Cook, has talked more in this episode
I know.
than he has in every other season combined. So I don't know if this is a great new addition or not.
Probably
I
not.
like it so far. but
Probably
we'll
not,
see.
yeah.
Do something about it, no.
Yeah.
But well, tomorrow is November 1st. So what type of storms or weather do you think that people should be preparing for in the next season?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really not one to do a snow forecast.
Right.
But this year I'm going out on a limb a little bit. And the reason I am is because there's some of our forecasters that I used to work with, they say, boy, if you have this kind of September, you have this kind of October, it's going to translate to this kind of November and this kind of December. And translating this year could be an early winter, an early snow, like we saw in December 2010. So what do we get on average down here, Dan? Have you forgotten? You're thinking Allentown, right?
Well, actually, we recently moved and we are on the edge of Blue Mountains, so,
Uh-oh.
so our snowfall total annually is like, I don't know, 60 or.
Well, you had that last year up there.
Oh, we had like a 32 incher last year.
Yeah.
One storm, 32 inches.
So I think what we're gonna get down here, Palma, is we're gonna have one storm with a 15-inch snowfall. And the reason I say that is, when it turns cold in November, and it turns cold, if you look at the long-term maps, I'm sure you've been looking at them, these weeklies and stuff, you look at, it's gonna get very cold in November, it's gonna get very cold in December. And that could mean a bona fide white Christmas. That could mean a bona fide.
Which I always hope for. And in
Yeah.
South Jersey, how
Yeah.
often do we see them? I mean,
Yeah.
very, very rare.
But see, what's been happening over the years is these storms, which had a history when I first came in the Weather Service, of forming off of Hatteras, North Carolina, and then coming up the coast, they're now forming farther north. So farther north and closer, they're giving us rain. So I think what you're gonna see is a good old knockdown, drag out Hatteras low form in December.
Okay.
And you're going to get it coming up the coast. It's gonna take 3 to 5 days, but unfortunately, Dan, and you've been through it and you live by the coast too, when you get that kind of snow, what do you get? Your hurricane force winds, you get severe tidal flooding,
You get tidal flooding.
and you get the whole works. So, it's not something very pretty. It shuts down the entire northeast corridor. Will it be like 78, 79? I don't think so, but the waters out there are very, very warm.
We had a big one right near Christmas in 2010.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
That was 18.4 inches in one day.
2010, the Boxing Day blizzard, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was
26th, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah, that was
26.
that was La Nina too, I think.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. My wife makes one request. No big snowstorm when we're trying to get to the hospital. She's nervous about that. So I wish she's due on Christmas Day.
My
It would
son-
be a legitimate white Christmas.
My son was buried at the hospital in Philadelphia when he was born. I mean, buried at Frankfurt Hospital. And he was born in January, and we had a big snow. Boy, it was terrible. But anyway, yeah, that's what I look at. I look at more of a tidal concern than anything else. And Columbus Day we had the big tidal.
We've had, like I said, several
This one doubled it.
seasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this one doubled it.
Several early ones this season. And the last few winters, we have been kind of, you know, I know in the last year we didn't have a tidal flooding talk, but
Right.
we didn't miss a whole lot of tidal flooding until the past few weeks.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a precursor of what's to come? You know, October's getting active, but it's still warm.
October,
You just
yeah.
think it's going to be colder, active with tidal flooding, you know, through the holidays?
And the other thing too, yeah, I think so. And the other thing too is, we have never. I don't think we've ever evacuated for a winter storm. Have we ever evacuated for a winter? I don't think so. And the reason we may is because if you have one of these powerhouse storms and it covers a big area, you're going to be without power. And if the power goes out, it's going to be cold. The water's going to be cold. So who knows? That may be the next thing that we're going to start addressing.
And we've
Yeah.
seen little, like during Jonas, we could have evacuated
Okay,
if
May.
we knew it was as bad it was going to be.
Right.
And then the February 2010 blizzard, I know down in Cape May,
Right.
had a lot of frozen power, like ice and
Yeah.
power outages. And you're right, we evacuate for hurricanes. Do we start evacuating for winter storms?
And that's going to be part of this group that Tom's worked and you're working with and Tom's working with. That'll be another thing to throw into the equation if these storms continue to get like this. Now, before this October, which we had two tidal flooding events, the first one around Columbus Day, that was okay. We got up to minor. This one got up to major in some areas, especially Philly.
And
then-
Chesapeake Bay.
Chesapeake Bay, the Annapolis, Maryland, the Academy, they had their third highest tide on record. Their highest tide was Isabel in 2003, which destroyed parts of the Academy. So when you look at all this coming together and the frequency of which it's coming, yeah, you got to be prepared. We haven't had flooding like this. We haven't had minor tidal flooding since January, February this year. So we've gone almost the whole year prior to this. But you know this, and again, I have to go back to you got to you'll love this. Dan and I were in Ocean City, a big crowd, and it was about a month before Sandy. Remember?
Yeah, the hurricane preparedness.
And everything was dying. Everything was dying out in the tropics. Everything was dying out in the tropics. And our flow was west to northwest. Everything was blowing out. And I said it's going to be very, very hard to get a hurricane up here with this kind of flow. And Dan chimes in and he says, well, we still have 2 months to go in the hurricane season. Anything can happen. And wouldn't you know it, he put the jinx on New Jersey.
And I don't say that anymore. Anything can happen.
But it is true, we shouldn't put our guards down, is
No,
what
no,
I
no.
really think
No.
what that lesson
And
is.
just like you said to open the show, people, since Sandy kind of forget, since it's been so long since we've even had moderate tidal flooding, people kind of forget that too. I mean, and if we have a significant a really strong nor'easter, you know, something on the level of Jonas or December '92 or
December 92 was the last one.
yeah.
That was a powerful one. That was a powerful one.
December 11th, I lost a
And the-
Corvette.
And the early season ones, you tapped into it too, can tap the warmer water and sometimes be a little stronger than say the January, February ones, just because, I mean, that water
They
is
call
so
it-
warm off
they-
the coast.
I think not to knock the Hurricane Center, but I think once things get out of the tropical DNA, the Hurricane Center has a tough time transitioning to the winter type.
Right.
And these hybrid storms that we have, like the one Veterans Day storm, and like this one, you know, it's named Wanda now.
Yep.
This one that's out there now is called Wanda. It's the 21st tropical storm of the season. It blasted New England.
I will say, yeah, New England, my nephew goes to college in southeastern Massachusetts. No power for 4.5 days and almost 100-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
And that was a nor'easter. That wasn't a hurricane.
And it wasn't even named.
Right.
It
It
wasn't
wasn't
even
named.
named.
People
So-
get tied up in a name. And
Yeah, so what happens this time of year, you get a tropical intrusion, and then you get a polar, semi-polar. This wasn't really cold air, but you have something from the north, and then they become hybrid storms. But they have their beginnings in the tropics, and with the water running 6 to 8 degrees above normal in the northeast, that's adding fuel to the fire. So yeah, but they and now probably in a week or so you'll have lake effects notice because we got cold air mass coming down. So look, it could be a very interesting November into December.
And so Jim Eberwine says everyone gets sleds for Christmas this year, right? That'd be a good gift.
People ask me, I bought a snowblower a couple of years ago, and people asked me, what kind of winter is it going to be? And I said, 2.5 snowblower.
Well, you mentioned the snow, but you also said that could bring tidal flooding, which
Absolutely.
means that tidal flooding is really a year-round
Oh,
threat. Do you
Yeah.
think people know that, or maybe
We do.
visitors might not know?
No, visitors have no idea. No, we down here, in some cases, don't know. There's this National Weather Service is trying to do this. We're going to be a weather-ready nation, right? That's the latest. We're going to be a weather-ready nation. Everybody's going to know about weather because we have storm-ready communities, we have tsunami warning communities. But I question that because every time I see a big storm, I see a car sitting in 4 feet of water. Or I see a person driving off of this, getting caught out here, and I'm thinking, how can we become a weather-ready nation? How come with all the communications we're getting today, the people are still not getting the word?
I've even seen them drive around barriers. That's what
yeah.
I love. All right, like the town does a responsible thing, close the road flooded, do not pass. People drive around them. And it's just
They don't realize.
right.
The average car down the shore is probably $50,000. Okay, you take that into salt water every once in a while, it's going to rust, it's going to corrode. People don't realize that. So keep your car out of, I mean, everything is there on and in the public domain to look at these tide gauges, to look at these forecasts, and you can predict these things days ahead of time.
Now, do you think this is not like to gloom and doom and whatnot, but with our changing climate, with the warming climate, with the slowly rising sea levels, and you could say geologically speaking, with the slowly sinking, islands and whatnot, tidal flooding becomes more common. And for instance, the Chesapeake Bay, worst flooding in 2 decades. This wasn't even a nor'easter. I mean, this was like a low pressure coming up the coast. It was just like a strong low level jet.
Right.
It wasn't a powerful storm, and I don't think it was exactly synced up with the new or full moon either, right?
No, the 29th is
Right, so it wasn't even the most astronomically high tides, it wasn't a strong, powerful nor'easter, and you still had the worst flooding in decades.
Yeah.
So, is that a warning sign saying, all right, we've had it easy, but tidal flooding, we can put better pumps in, we can, do more infrastructure, but, tidal flooding is here to stay, and if anything, it will become a little more frequent.
This was a southeaster. This was,
Right.
this was not a nor'easter. This had no center over us. The center was over Ohio.
Right.
We had a warm front going up the coast. We had that little high pressure to the north, and it sets up that Venturi effect, and it was coming in from the southeast. And that's why it favored the Chesapeake Bay and the Delaware Bay. And yes, they, like I said, Annapolis, their highest tide was in Isabel, 2003.
Yeah.
This was their third highest.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working back then, the people in the Chesapeake Bay, they called me at 3 o'clock in the morning. They had 15,000 people surrounded by water. And the guy asked me, he says, Jim, when's high tide? And I said, all day. And it was all day. It just kept coming and coming, all the way up to Baltimore.
Yeah.
And that, and it was incredible. But this was not even a storm.
Right.
This was a gradient, a
Yeah.
wind gradient. Just the winds, like eight lanes of traffic on the parkway, let's squeeze them into two. That's what the atmosphere did. It squeezed everything into 2 lanes.
Yeah.
And that wind just, because if you look at the tide this time, you had the high tide come up like this, and then an hour later you had the wind, and then you had another surge, but the surge happened after high tide. So
Right.
if they coincided, then you would have had major flooding at the Jersey Shore,
Yeah.
but you didn't have that. But the wind was 1 hour or so after the time of high tide, and it peaked. It was interesting.
And during Jonas, we had that.
Oh,
We had
Jonas
the
exploded.
peak wind, plus rain and snowfall, plus high tide, all at
I
the
have
same
never
exact
seen
time.
the tide come in as fast as I did with Jonas, because the storm probably came off from out of the Midwest.
Yep.
Came out of the Midwest, went over the Delmarva, and exploded. And we had 85-mile-an-hour winds coming right up the coast
Yep.
as the tide was going up, and a full moon too.
Yep.
It was a
Perfect
full
storm.
moon. Yeah. So.
So what are all the contributing factors for flooding? You mentioned full moon, high tide. What are other things people could look out for to know if it's going to be flooded?
Well, Dan mentioned the other thing too. Before it used to be, when you read a paper, it was sea level rise, SLR, sea level rise. But now you're seeing something called relative sea level rise, which has to do with the land going shh. So the land is sinking, and New Jersey is one of the hot spots where the land is sinking. The Gulf of Mexico is the other. So you take that part of the equation and have subsidence of the land, and then you have the tide rising, like, that's going to add to it. That's going to add to it. So that's what you're seeing. And that's getting very popular now in some of the publications. 10, 15 years ago, I never saw that term, relative sea level
Yeah.
rise. But now it's relative sea level rise versus just flat sea level rise.
Yeah.
And, New Jersey's been one of the hot spots.
Yeah. And we don't want to paint like a gloom and doom picture
No.
where the island's going to be underwater. Like
No.
we're not saying that. You are going to have tidal flooding be more common. We're going to have the Resiliency Center for Education.
Right.
There are efforts you can. I mean, homes are being built a little higher. That's a great preventative measure with all the precautions you can take.
Right.
Pumps are being installed. Roads are being made higher, and so so we are combating it every way we can. And the Jersey Shore will be a wonderful place to live. Decades from now. It's just tidal flooding is a reality we have to live with.
One of the things I'd like to see change, and the mayor's probably going to say, shut that guy up. and that is state of emergency. We had a state of emergency around Columbus time.
We had it last week as well.
Yeah,
So last Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah. And I would like to see, because to this point, and you mentioned not scaring anybody, I'd like to see now in a state of inconvenience. And that's what this has been so far. We are being inconvenienced. I mean, back in the earlier days, 20, 30 years ago, our biggest concern when we had a storm was crap, the cable went out. So at this point, and this is the time you have to address this, it's still a state of inconvenience for us, but that inconvenience is getting worse. And now, at some point, it's going to become a true state of emergency. But right now, in the early civil defense days, back in the 70s when I started with the Weather Service in the 80s, they had the civil defense. When they put out a state of emergency, man, remember that? You could not move. You could not move because the roads were shut down. You couldn't get anybody in there to do anything. But when you put a lot of these things out, people become very complacent, you know? So
It's true, it's harder to distinguish a serious threat
versus, yeah.
and
And they also do it
inconvenience.
statewide,
Yeah.
which is a problem. I mean,
Which
if
is
they
a problem.
regionalize it where,
If they
you know,
could,
something's
and
going
you
on.
can.
Yeah.
You can regionalize
Right.
it. With all the technology that Tom, there's so much technology that we look at, it's mind-boggling, and it's updated, but it's all in the public domain. You know, the Mount Holly Weather Office is right up the road, you know? And then you got New York, then we got Washington covering us to the southwest. There's so much stuff out there, you can actually get a jump on this stuff 4 and 5 days ahead of time. Easy, it's very easy. You know, people say, oh, tidal flooding is so difficult. Well, I can tell you when there's going to be tidal flooding, but as the event gets closer, then you start addressing the heights and the impact. If you had not had the wind with this one, it would not have been a big deal.
Right. You have to see exactly what all the things Palma was asking about, what factors contribute, if those are gonna line up, and if so, where they're gonna line up, because they don't always line up for the whole Jersey Shore.
Right.
That's why Jonas was worse in Cape May County, that's why Sandy was worse in Monmouth and Ocean
Monmouth
counties.
Yeah, you're gonna, even though New Jersey's 127 miles from Sandy Hook to Cape May, we can still look at the state and say, you guys are gonna be okay down here.
Yeah.
You guys up here, you're really gonna get it up here.
Right.
And that's unique for such a small state, that we can do that, instead of the whole state being just blasted, you know? Yeah, you're right about this. The idea is not to scare anyone at all. The idea is to educate, and the idea is to get the people informed that, I remember down in Wildwood, the emergency management guy down there, they were the only ones that had a siren when the tide was coming in, high tide. Not necessarily that it would flood, but he would announce the high tide, and the people would get their cars and take them to a higher spot. I don't know if they still do it, but that was a great idea, you know? That's what you start with. You start with your car, and then you start with your property, and then you want to make sure that the people are going to be safe too. So, but it's an equation that can be fixed. But what you guys are doing here is top of the line, absolutely top of the line, and you'll get all the support. You'll see the surrounding support. NOAA loves stuff like this. NOAA loves to address these groups that are doing something very productive like this. Absolutely.
And before we continue, I want to make sure we ask our Facebook viewers, if you have any questions, you could add them to the comments section. I don't see any questions right now.
Oh,
Just
no,
welcome
Kermit
back.
wants to know how Dan's family's doing.
Okay. Family's wonderful. Yeah, it's growing by one. December 25th, we're having another girl. So we'll have my wife, we'll have our 2.5-year-old Kenzie, we'll have 2 female dogs and another female. So I'm the only male in the house, which I'm wonderful with. And Kenzie and I are starting Daddy and Me dance lessons next week. Now, I don't dance. I have to be drunk.
Can I
to
pay
dance.
money to see that?
So it's all moms and one dad, I believe.
You're not going to be attending these classes drunk, or
I will not, no. I want to be sober with Kenzie.
Now, was it
but-
the 21st or 25th? The 21st or 25th?
For,
The baby.
25th. So it's on
It's
Christmas
Christmas.
Day.
You're gonna have
And
a
there's
white
something
Christmas.
to that because my wife, her mom, my mom, Kenzie, and Amanda are all born on Saturday.
Wow.
And Christmas is on a Saturday. So we're pulling for the 18th, just so we can be home for Christmas, whatever day it comes.
Question for Jim, are we going to have a rough winter?
yes, Sabone wants to
Keep
know.
your eyes on the middle of November through Thanksgiving and through a good part of December.
And a white Thanksgiving, I want to say, 89?
89.
We had a powerful storm,
Keep
and I
your-
remember, I mean, that's more rare, but white Christmas, I think the snowiest Christmas we've ever had, snow on Christmas Day in South Jersey was at 0.9 inches.
Yeah.
So we really
Not
haven't
a big
had
deal.
a big Christmas.
But keep your to whoever's asking that question. Keep your eye. It's going to turn chilly this week. We're going to get highs in the 50s. But keep your eyes on the middle of November through December. And it could be very interesting.
And Jim and I haven't seen each other in
Sounds
a year,
mysterious.
and we're both thinking December is going to be a very stormy month.
Yeah, very stormy.
So we will see.
You might-
So once again, you're watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are back, not quite regularly just yet, begun with all my family stuff going on and the pandemic and the holidays, of course. It's always a tough time of the year to have regularity. We will be back every Sunday evening. We're hoping at the very start of 2022. For the rest of the year, we're going to shoot for weekends when things work out, and we'll post online when we are going to have a show a few days ahead of time.
How can people reach out to you? Are you still?
Oh, Jim's retired. He does
Oh,
nothing
I
now.
think I
Oh,
see.
yeah, you can.
He is not doing
He's the busiest retired man I've ever
He's
met.
an emergency.
Yeah, I'm the emergency management coordinator for Absecon, but if people want to drop me an email, they can always do it. It's 534james@comcast.net.
You are teaching classes. You
I
are
teach.
traveling across the country to
Boston.
Boston next. Okay.
I'm going to Boston in 2 weeks, your hometown.
You gotta get some shout
I'm
outs while you're up
going to
there.
spray paint that stadium up there in Foxborough. Eagles.
That stadium's not doing too well this
I know.
year. We've been spoiled for the last 2 decades, but that's wonderful. We were in Salem, Mass. last weekend with Ken's
The Witches.
Yeah, the Witches. Very, very busy for Halloween. So Jim's always been a great guest, and do we have Irish pub gear to add to his collection? Or are we rusty?
We're rusty, but we'll take care of
He's
that.
gonna get it on the way out.
Somebody
Yes.
said you're going to give me keys to something.
Oh, maybe keys to the Irish pub. Oh, they don't lock the doors. They're open
No.
24 hours.
BMW.
Yes, they are.
Well,
I'm
they're
gonna order
not quite,
some
but
sandwiches
close.
Right after the show.
Yeah.
The food's delicious
No,
here.
just being here is it's so cool being here.
Yeah.
This is if you turn the lights down and think of
You feel like you're-
Freddie-
Well, this was a speakeasy at one
Or
point.
you know, like 1938, listening to War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. Yeah, yeah.
Turn the radio on.
Or Halloween, the movie, watch it in here. Oh, this is cool. This is cool.
Hope everyone has a very happy Halloween. It was a treat that we had dry weather, but Horn in the Gym, some tricks coming up in November and December, so we'll see what Mother Nature has.
Yep. And if they don't, I'm going to Phoenix.
Great.
Anything else you want to say something?
Here, guys?
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Thank
Okay.
you, Paula. Thank you, Tom. Dan.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. The